Hi, I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, it was the last meeting today for San Diego's current city council. We'll have a look at the changes ahead and a possible problem for one of the mayor-elect's proposals. The Pentagon's ban on women in combat gets a new legal challenge tonight.
And I'm Peggy Pico. Also ahead, 200 nations gather for the International Climate Change Summit. We'll talk with best-selling author Richard Louv about who's missing from the global debate and why. Plus, the City Council extends San Diego's hotel room tax for the next 40 years. But none of the money will go to the city's general fund. We'll explain the pros and the cons of the tax in just a few moments.
San Diego Zoo gets a new solar power plant. They say it's the future of solar energy. KPBS Evening Edition starts now.
KPBS Evening Edition is made possible by Joan and Erwin Jacobs and by
San Diego City Council will look a lot different when it holds its next meeting Monday. That's when a new mayor and 2 new city council members take their seats at City Hall. The current council met for the last time today. KPBS Metro reporter Katie Orr joins us now from the News Center with a look at what will be changing. So, Katie, first of all, who is leaving City Council?
Well, Councilman Carl DeMaio is leaving the council. He gave up his seat representing District 5 to run for mayor. And of course, he lost that election, which means he'll no longer hold an office in the city of San Diego, though rumors are already flying about where he might turn up next. And of course, Mayor Jerry Sanders is terming out of office. He will hold his last press conference as mayor tomorrow, but he'll still be around as well. He's landed a job as head of the Regional Chamber of Commerce. And Council President Tony Young is resigning. He'll still be at the December council meeting, but he starts his new position as CEO of the local chapter at the American Red Cross on January 2nd.
So what other new faces will be seeing around City Hall?
Well, of course, Bob Filner will be taking over as mayor. He's already been attempting to put some policies in place, though he technically doesn't have any power until he's sworn in next Monday. Joining him in taking the oath of office are Councilman-elect Mark Kersey from District 5 and Scott Sherman from District 7. Both are Republicans. Kersey ran unopposed and takes over DeMaio's seat. Sherman represents District 7. And additionally, council members Todd Gloria and Sherry Leitner also won re-election, and Marty Emerald ran for and won the newly created District 9 seat.
And what about Filner's plan to bring former councilwoman Donna Fry back to City Hall?
Well, she wants to come, and Mayor-elect Filner wants her to as well. He was planning to make her the director of open government, which would deal with ensuring transparency and public access to City Hall. But Fry retired from City Hall when her council term was up, and she currently collects a city pension. A San Diego law says retirees cannot get a pension and a full-time salary at the same time unless they've been elected to office. So Fry could be hired as a provisional employee and would work 90 days a year, or she could work for free. But the City Council would need to act to allow her to come back as a full-time employee while still receiving her pension.
KPBS Metro reporter Katie Orr. The ACLU of Northern California has filed a lawsuit against the Pentagon over its policy banning women from combat. KPBS reporter Beth Ford Roth has this update.
The ACLU filed the lawsuit on behalf of 4 female service members. The women say despite the fact they fought on the front lines in Iraq and Afghanistan, they're prohibited from getting the same kind of promotions as their male counterparts because of the Pentagon policy.
Women have been killed on the battlefield and many more have been wounded in Iraq and Afghanistan. 2 of the plaintiffs in this lawsuit were wounded during the course of their service, earning the Purple Heart and other designations recognizing their valor in combat.
Now, in a response to the lawsuit, a spokeswoman for Defense Secretary Leon Panetta said he remains committed to expanding the role of women in the military. And indeed, in May, more than 14,000 military jobs opened up to women that had been previously closed off to them because of their proximity to combat. Yet, according to the ACLU, there are still 238,000 positions from which women are banned from serving in solely because of their sex.
I left the military because the policy limits my future in the Marine Corps. I would be assigned to positions based on my gender rather than on my qualifications or my accomplishments. This didn't make sense for me personally or professionally, and it frankly doesn't make sense for the military.
And there are 4 developed countries that currently allow women in combat. They are Israel, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia.
When the cost at the gas pump skyrocketed last month, oil industry analysts said refinery shutdowns were to blame. But senators from California, Oregon, and Washington say something isn't adding up. They say emission reports from the state's refinery show the plants were producing when they were reported to be shut down. Now the senators want the Justice Department to investigate to see if the market was manipulated. There's something new at the San Diego Zoo, 5 electric car charging stations in the parking lot, giving a look into the future of how solar energy can be used and stored. KPBS reporter Tom Fudge has the story.
Mayor Jerry Sanders pulled up to a charging station in an electric car to play his part in the media event. But this was about more than just a few new car charging stations connected to solar canopies. It was about the creation of a small solar power plant in the zoo parking lot.
What's really unique.
Jim Avery of SDG&E said the solar panels can produce 90 kilowatts, enough to power 18 homes.
Now what really makes it unique is what we've added on top of that, and that's battery storage as well.
The solar power can be stored in 2 large batteries located in a small building on the edge of the parking lot. When the batteries are full, the excess power goes to charge cars or feed the electrical grid.
So we can actually take power that's coming in on the solar canopy, take it into the grid, we can put it into cars, we can put it into energy storage, and at the same time we can also take the energy storage back to support the grid.
Storage of solar energy is a huge issue because the sun doesn't always shine. The 100 kilowatt storage system means when the sun goes down, its power can still be used to charge cars or power someone's house. Advisors to SDG&E say the batteries are state-of-the-art using advanced lithium polymer technology, and they're part of a small but sophisticated energy hub. Byron Washam is with UC San Diego. He says the university is also planning to build a solar energy hub just like the one at the zoo.
This is where the world will be watching to see how well this system operates.
It could be the future of zero-emission energy, but it's also the zoo. The armadillo is named Armando.
With help and assistance from several departments.
Pedal Power will be featured in Escondido this spring. It will be the starting point for the Amgen Tour of California bike race. For the first time, racers will travel south to north, 750 miles through deserts along the coast and over mountains to the finish line in Santa Rosa. Escondido hosted the race in 2009. The Tour of California is the largest professional bike race of its kind in the U.S. San Diego voted to extend the hotel tax program for another 40 years. Peggy Pico explains how the money will be used and why none of it will go into the general fund.
For the next 4 decades, a 2% hotel room tax will be assessed and collected by hoteliers in San Diego. The tax, expected to yield about $30 million a year, will be used to promote tourism. But none of that revenue will go to the city's general fund. Joining me to talk about the pros and cons of this kind of tax is my guest, Jordan Berry, professor of tax law at the University of San Diego Law School. Jordan, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This 2% room tax, it's going to be assessed by several hotels over occupancy of 30, and it'll be paid for by hotel guests. What are the concerns about taxing these hoteliers, actually taxing people this way?
Right, well, the key thing to remember here is that the tax has sort of been in existence. The difference is how the money is going to be moved. Before, it went to the city, and the city was largely putting that money into promotional efforts for tourism and such. Now it's going to go to the hoteliers to do basically a similar thing. But again, it's not going to be in city hands, it's going to be in hotelier hands.
I think that's one of the concerns. Private individuals are taxing people. Is that legal?
Right, so I mean, I wouldn't think of it as the hoteliers are taxing people, but I would think that they are getting public tax monies and they are private agents. So in a way that might be, some people find that very concerning. Others think perhaps it's less of a problem.
What if something goes wrong, price gouging or whatever? Can the city take back control legally of this tax initiative?
I don't know about the exact details of that. I would imagine that it's probably pretty hard for the city to get that money back. So most likely it will stay in the hoteliers' hands, barring something pretty unusual happening.
Are there other laws out there that would prevent, let's say, like price fixing oversight committees that mandate things like this to regulate when something like this happens?
Yeah, there are a lot of antitrust laws and so forth that prevent price fixing by private actors. So the hotels can't get together and say we're all going to charge $300 a night and make a deal like that. That would be illegal, and that's a federal violation as well as a state issue.
So perhaps there's some checks and balances.
Absolutely. The question, of course, is whether you think those are enough.
Okay. Earlier on Midday Edition, I just wanted to say we talked with Joe Terzi, the head of San Diego's Convention and Visitors Bureau, or CONVIS. He said without the tourist marketing district, San Diego would be in a very bad position right now because we would not have the money to go out and compete with those we compete with every day for that tourist coming into San Diego. Now, Jordan, he has a point. Competition is a good thing typically for business. Are there other positives to this room tax? Well,
the question is whether you think that the city or the hotels are going to do a better job of promoting tourism in San Diego with this money. There's a little less flexibility not coming to the city. They can't move the money away from tourism, but maybe you like that if you want to make sure tourism is supported. So potentially, if you think the hotels are better at this, this is probably a good thing.
Let's talk about Prop 26. That basically, it says that it has to be voted on because it's a tax. The hotelier is saying it's not a tax, but opponents say it is. Where does it fall in that as far as Prop 26?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's not entirely clear. No one has ever taken a case quite like this to court and gotten a ruling. So that's one of the big obstacles that might stand in the way of the new convention financing arrangement, is whether the court will in fact say this is a legal arrangement.
All right, and I think San Diego has already having a judge look at this, correct?
Yeah, they've already started the process to get things moving, but there hasn't been a ruling just yet.
All right, Professor of Law Jordan Berry, thanks so much for your insight.
Oh, thanks for having me.
About 2,000 homeless people live in San Diego's North County, where there's no centralized winter shelter. Instead, a network of programs help those without a roof over their heads when the weather gets cold. KPBS reporter Allison St. John says the agencies are seeing more and more homeless families.
When Sandra Samuels separated from her ex, she found her life unraveling. She lost her job and about a year ago found herself without a home.
I never thought that I'd be in this situation. But here I am, and the economy now is really bad.
Samuels is struggling to survive, not only for herself, but also for her 17-year-old daughter, Andrea.
If it was just me, I could handle it a little bit better. But when you have your child with you, you wondering, that am I being a good mother?
Andrea's in her final year at school, but she hasn't told any of her friends that she's staying in a homeless shelter.
To me, it's really hard. I don't really want to talk about it, so I just try to keep it to myself. It's just really difficult for me because I'm so used to having my own room and what I used to have, and always going out whenever I wanted to with my friends, not having to have like a curfew to go back to a place like so early. But I just had to hang in there with my mom.
The women can spend 2 weeks staying in this church home. It's part of the Interfaith Shelter Network. Pastor James Jepseth says the congregation borrowed the cubicle dividers from a neighboring church.
We just pop them all together, put it up, get everybody settled in, and very simple. If you're not going to do this, if you're not going to help people who need help, you're just a social club with a T on the roof.
A more permanent shelter for families is going up in Vista to meet the growing need.
This construction site is the site of the new North County Shelter for Families. The number of families that need shelter in the winter has been increasing every year.
It's going to be very comfortable, and our families will have a room with a ceiling and a door, as opposed to a cubicle with no ceiling and a curtain. So that will encourage them help raise their self-esteem, and give them a little bit of sense of dignity as they get their lives together.
For the past few years, Russ Blackwood of Operation Hope has run the winter shelter for families in a rented warehouse. That will all change.
And this will be a children's playground. This will be walled in right here with a wall in front, so it will be an enclosed compound for privacy for the women and safety for the children.
Beth Brainerd Halleck will help run the shelter when it opens with 46 beds.
Once you come into the gate and you're behind the walls, your children are safe, you know they're in a safe compound, a safe campus, and that less stress allows you to put your focus on taking classes and doing your resume and looking for a job and turning your life around so that your children can feel safe and secure. Because the children, if they're wounded when they're young, they're going to repeat that cycle when they're older, and we need to stop that.
The only trouble is this site won't open until January 1st.
The need for family shelters out here, yes, is huge. We do need more family shelters.
It's going to be a challenge to find places for families to stay until January, says Jennifer Conti, who works for the Community Resource Center in Encinitas. Even in that relatively affluent community, Conti says they get 3 to 5 calls a day from people looking for shelter.
When it gets colder, not only do we get more phone calls, all the other organizations get more phone calls, but the resources, that we don't have enough to give those families. Having Operation Hope, having that not open until January is going to be really hard on a bunch of families this year.
Families can apply for motel vouchers from North County Lifeline to tide them over for up to 28 days. Lifeline does have twice as much money for vouchers this year as last, but already almost 90 families have applied for them, and demand often outstrips supply. Sandra and Andrea Samuels face weeks of moving from shelter to shelter, trying to keep their spirits up till Sandra finds a job.
Of course you worry, but you have to be strong and go on. You're trying to tell your child things are gonna be all right. Your mama gonna get a job. And I'm proud of her because despite us moving from place to place, she's still keeping up her grades, and she still is going to graduate. People don't want to be homeless. Honestly, they don't want to be out here. And I'm speaking for myself, but I know I spoke with a lot of people, and a lot of people that had real good jobs, and they'd been brought down here, so it could happen to anybody.
Allison St. John, KPBS News.
I'm Ray Suarez. On the next news hour, President Obama meets Mexico's president-elect, Enrique Peña Nieto, at the White House. That's Tuesday on the PBS NewsHour.
The U.S. and 200 other nations are gathering for the International Climate Change Summit in Qatar. Peggy Pico finds out who's missing from the global debate on climate change.
The impact of extending the Kyoto protocols to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is a hot topic at the International Climate Change Summit in Doha, Qatar. It's no secret that much of what's decided at the summit will fall on the shoulders of generations to come. But how much do young people care about climate change? Here to help answer that question is Richard Louv, author of the bestsellers The Nature Principle and Last Child in the Woods. Richard, thanks so much for joining us. Your books focus on what you have called youth's nature deficit disorder. Explain to us what that is.
Well, it's not a known medical diagnosis. Maybe it should be, but it's not. But it is a way that Last Child in the Woods came out in 2005. We really didn't have much language to talk about what we all sensed was happening, this generational gap between children and nature. But more than ever in history, children are disconnected from the natural world.
How are they disconnected, and what's causing that?
Well, they don't go outside much. I mean, they're on video games, or they're on computers a lot. It's more and more of a virtual experience that they're familiar with. Their parents are afraid of strangers, even though our profession of journalism has greatly magnified the reality there of stranger danger. So there's great fear in the world. And one of those fears is actually the fear of nature. And this starts real early when we start telling kids that the end is near, that it's all about recycling. It's not about the joy of nature. It's about how we're destroying nature. Now, let me make clear, I don't think we should stop telling the bad news about what we're doing to nature. But ecophobia is a phrase that's used to describe children who early on begin to hear that message that associating nature with destruction, that they'll carry with them for the rest of their lives. And instead of associating it with joy, they'll associate it with fear later on.
Some would argue, though, there's still Boy and Girl Scouts, there's still camping, this recycling or upcycling, as many call it, is a positive connection to nature. Doesn't that help?
Yeah, but it's not enough. And Boy Scouts are losing membership pretty dramatically. Just the statistics that I won't go into on this disconnection are quite troubling.
How is this nature deficit, so to speak, linked to climate change activism among youth and adults?
Well, it's been asked recently in several articles, where are the young people? Why aren't they in the streets almost about climate change? I think there's two reasons. One is the ecophobia, that children are being raised disconnected from nature and, in fact, fearing it. The second reason, I think, is because of environmentalism and journalism. Let me give you an example. I sat with some students at DePaul University recently who wanted to take me to lunch. And these were environmental studies students. And one of them said he had no sense of connection to the big environmental organizations. He went to their meeting. They're all old. And in fact, one of the biggest environmental organizations in the world, 67 is the average age, 64 is the new age. Is the incoming age.
Let me ask you about that. Previous generations, let's say in the 50s, those kids growing up didn't seem to care much about the environment, or they weren't told about it a whole lot. But in the 60s, they turned that around. They kind of championed the cause. Couldn't these kids also turn around like that?
Well, they can, but there's some big things that can't be done just with recycling. Something larger is happening. That group of students that I sat with, one of them was a young woman, a very hip young woman. I know that because she had tattoos. She said, all my life, I'm 20 years old, all my life I've been told it's too late when it comes to nature. All my life. Now, she's an environmental studies student who's hanging on to her idealism by a thread. But in truth, the message that she has mainly received, you and I had some decades to have an alternative view of the future. But she's surrounded by primarily people older than her and younger who are saying it's too late.
There is that argument climate change is too big, it's natural. What kind of impact can we really make? Can a kid or an adult make an impact on climate change?
I keep thinking what it's like to be a 14-year-old today surrounded by adults who shrug their shoulders and say it's too late, or that changing light bulbs is enough. We've got to break this down a little bit. In the 60s, it wasn't climate change. It was a lot of issues. It was the pollution of our rivers. And, our rivers got cleaner because of that commitment in Earth Day 1970. It was things that still go on. We don't have to agree on climate change to be worried about the effect of pollution on our health, to be worried about this disconnection from nature that we see in our kids and ourselves that impoverishes our experience as human beings. I've seen this issue of children and nature bring liberals and conservatives together. It's happening in San Diego. There's a campaign here in San Diego, Children and Nature Collaborative. And they want to take action on that. They don't have to agree on everything, but nobody wants to be in the last generation where it's considered normal and expected for kids to go outside and just experience nature.
All right. We are out of time, so we're going to have to get more of this on our website, kpbs.org. Best-selling author Richard Louv, thanks so much for your insights today.
The number of people in San Diego County relying on the food bank each month has almost doubled in the past 5 years. With so many families and individuals struggling this holiday season, the need for food donations is great, and that's where the Stuff the Bus food drive comes in. Last year, San Diegans donated about 15,000 pounds of food during the one-day drive to stock the shelves of San Diego's primary food bank. That's about 7 tons of food, and the need continues to grow.
With such high demand facing the food bank this holiday season, we are grateful to MTS, North County Transit District, and Albertsons for teaming up.
They're all teaming up for the 5th annual Stuff the Bus food drive on Saturday.
With the help of our partners and the community, we will make sure that struggling families can celebrate the holidays without wondering where their next meal will come from.
The faces of hunger in San Diego may look familiar. a father whose salary just isn't enough to cover bills and food, a senior citizen on a fixed income having to decide whether to pay for medication or rent, or a military wife like Marla Barlow on a tight budget trying to stretch every dollar to feed her family of 3.
Many of us live below the poverty line. Most people don't know that. They think we get provided everything, and it's unfortunately not the case.
About 13,000 low-income military families in the county receive assistance from the food bank.
Organizations and functions like this help us. It's not charity. It's a hand up, not a handout.
San Diego Food Bank feeds more than 350,000 people a month throughout the county. Transit operators will be collecting food to stuff the bus, and Albertsons will be selling prepackaged non-perishable food this week to donate to the food bank.
Please visit one of 15 participating Albertsons locations this Saturday, December 1st. With your support, we'll win the battle against hunger.
And for a list of the bus locations or food items to donate, go to the transit website, sdmts.com. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. Have a great night.